Welcome back, Miami Dolphins. One of them might be unfortunate, but we're going to go over all of the players that I think could possibly get traded from the Miami Dolphins to other teams. We already kind of know some names, but there's going to be a couple, and one of them might be unfortunate. But here's the thing. So first off, I'm already hearing that, Jalen Phillips is probably going to go to the Eagles. I think we're hearing a lot of that ramping up. I'm thinking that's going to happen on Monday, but the main people that I think are going to be on the trade block, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Zach Sealer could possibly be on there, but, I'm not seeing too much trade value for him at this point. I think that really tanked with this year. Devon Achane, there's not a lot of trade talk, but, I don't know. I think a second round pick for Devon would be, something that I would consider as well. Jalen Waddle. That's the talk of the town. And what I'm hearing is that they want a first-round pick for him. My opinion, I love Jalen Waddle. I think he's a superstar. I think he's been underutilized in Miami. There's a couple of things to this because I would love to keep Jalen Waddle in Miami. 100%. I would love to keep him here. But if somebody's willing to give a first-round pick plus something else, or even just a first-round pick, I don't know, man. I think you kind of got to consider it because when you go into this draft, you have a lot of talent at wide receiver in this draft. I would say the best position group in this draft is probably wide receiver. You got Denzel Boston. You got Chris Brazzell. You got Jordan Tyson. You got, what's his face? Pretty much the same guy in Mekhi Lemon. You have a lot of players in this draft. So I know it would be very unfortunate, but, by all intents and purposes, that interim general manager, Champ Kelly, might be trying to do a reset because, it's tough, but one of the things that I think is key here is that once we get the offensive linemen back, some of the teams that we're going to face, it might be hard to, I don't want to say that we're not going to lose, but, it's the Dolphins. You know how we typically do things where, this team is going to be fighting to, get their next job somewhere else. And I think that's kind of the biggest problem this season is that, Mike McDaniels now, he knowing that he's going to probably get fired, you want to show out for your next team, whoever's going to hire you. So they're not just going to, go away and just want to have the first overall pick. So I think that's what we have to kind of consider here is that, I don't want to use the term tanking, but, if you have Jalen Waddle on this team and you have a couple of players and, when you kind of conceptualize this, if you get Austin Jackson and James Daniels back, then really all you're really looking at this offensive line is Jonah. And, you've seen what we can do without having a good offensive line. If you get your two-star, and I'll call them star offensive linemen back and you can block for a second, you're probably going to put up points, and I just don't see us completely, I think people are forgetting about that, you get your one-time Pro Bowl right guard and, pretty much star right tackle back. You're going to be running the ball better. You're going to be throwing the ball better. And this offense will put up points in the way that the defense is playing. I think people are going to look at 28-6 and think that the defense sucks. But if you watch the game, for the most part, the defense was kind of stopping Lamar Jackson most of the half. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to consider that I don't want it to happen. I'm going to be very clear here. I don't want Jalen Waddle to be traded. But sometimes people are desperate. Sometimes teams just want to have that piece. They see that they can get that piece, and they'll throw stuff at you. And if there's a good enough offer for Jalen Waddle, like I said, I don't want him to go, but there's a lot of wide receivers in this draft that you can definitely, use that pick to go and get if you're trying to do a full reset. So he's one of the key top players that I think we have to look for. depending on what happens with, I would say, I don't think New York's going to go and get him, but you have a lot of teams. I would hope they don't trade them to the Buffalo Bills, but that's a team that could throw stuff at us, knowing that it's a divisional team, knowing that we're just not going to want to trade him there. If they start throwing stuff at us, it's hard to imagine. Say, what if Buffalo offers you Keon Coleman and a first round pick for Jalen Waddle? Something like that. you gotta consider something like that. So I think, again, I want to preface that I don't want Jalen Waddle traded. But if somebody's going to throw stuff at you, I mean, that's an option. So then you have also Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. I'm hearing the Eagles do want Jalen Phillips, which, I'd hope they get multiple picks for him. I'd hope it's not just a fourth rounder. But, the thing is that one of the key things that I think is going to happen with this is, whatever you get for Jalen Phillips, he needs a contract next year. His contract is up. So whoever's trading for him, I think that's one of the bigger problems, is that whoever's trading for him has to give him a contract next year. So it's going to be one of those things that I wouldn't take anything less than a fourth rounder. And then with Bradley Chubb, you're probably going to get like a fifth or sixth. You have some of those players. Me personally, I think the offensive line stays the way it is. I don't think you trade anybody from the offensive line. I think you keep Aaron Brewer. I think you keep, obviously, Patrick Paul is non-negotiable. Unless you're throwing like 3 first-round picks, Patrick Paul is non-negotiable. He's not a part of this. I think you keep James Daniels, and Austin Jackson. I don't think you're going to get anything for them. And reality is, the only other person that I can see, which, in all honesty, I don't think he's played that well this season, is Minkah Fitzpatrick. I wonder what you could get for a Minkah Fitzpatrick. If you can get like a third, I would consider moving him too. I think he really hasn't played up to what he wants to play up to. So, but that's also a consideration for, the defensive coach. Do you want to trade away another star player on this team? I think Dante Trader has played great, but I think this secondary will really take a step back if you trade Minkah. So it's all depending on what they want to do. It's tough, but I think, there is a mindset that you do want to go into this draft with a lot of picks. There's a lot of quarterbacks. Me personally, I like Ty Simpson. I think he's fantastic. I think Fernando Mendoza is fantastic. Dante Moore is probably going to be the first overall pick. I don't know. I have to watch more of his tape. I'm not seeing that like first overall pick. I think, he's a good quarterback, but I think once he gets to the NFL, I don't know. We'll see what happens with him. But even still, I don't think we're getting the first overall pick. There's a bunch of wide receivers coming into this draft. It's first and second round heavy with wide receivers. And again, Devon Achane is also another option because you have Ollie Gordon, and there's some running backs. Like, this draft is very like offense heavy. So what do you do with that? I don't know. But again, I think there's going to be a bunch of trades coming into this Monday, Tuesday-ish. And, quite possibly if someone offers us the right deal for Jalen Waddle, if someone just starts really getting desperate and wants to throw it, has to be a first-round pick. Like, if they trade Jalen Waddle for anything less than a first-round pick, then I will be pissed. But if they're willing to throw a first-round pick at you, and you can go into this draft with 2 first-round picks and then, a bunch of other picks, you kind of got to see. I know we love Jalen Waddle, but the future, if you get the right general manager, which if you watch my last video, I talk about that. If you get the right one and the right head coach, you could, quickly turn this around. If you get a couple first-round picks, maybe even if somebody offers a second for Devon Achane, a second and, maybe a fifth or something like that, you go into this draft having like 10 picks, multiple in the first and second rounds. I mean, you could pick up some of these players, because again, when you look at this draft, there's a lot of players that mirror a lot of what our team is. I don't know. And then, like I said, you go into this, I can imagine that it probably isn't going to happen, but you go into this thinking that, okay, next year you got Patrick Paul, you got Jonah, who hopefully takes a step forward. You'll have Aaron Brewer, you'll have James Daniels because he signed a 2-year contract. Austin Jackson, I think, will have 1 year left, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll go into next year, you know, with an offensive line. And I think you sign Liam Eichenberg and Andrew Meyer is there, so you'll have a pretty decent start to the offensive line. I think you have to consider maybe again. I know we love these players, but do you consider maybe just completely resetting and trying to organically just tank for top picks and hope and strive to get the right general manager that can turn around? Because realistically, there's some people in the comments that are saying it's going to take like 5 years to rebuild. No, it's not. If you have the right general manager and the right head coach, it'll take I mean, you think of all of these things. Detroit, 2-14. With Dan Campbell, next year they've become a playoff contender, Super Bowl contender every single year. It took 1 year. Washington, they were like 4 and something. They got the right quarterback, got the right coach. They've been a playoff contender, Super Bowl contender since then. What's another one? Even if you look back at the Bills, the Buffalo Bills, they got the right head coach, right quarterback. It took them 2 years, and they completely turned it around. They've been a Super Bowl contender ever since. It's not that hard to turn a franchise around if you get the right people. So again, see what trades they make. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. If you want to trade Waddle, if you don't want to trade Waddle, let me know. As always, fins up, baby. Praise God, love guys. Great all the time. Love you all. Peace.